Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano. Today we're doing something a little different. Not entirely. This is kind of like the Smiling Friends episode where I'm talking about a show in general instead of a specific episode. But in this case, it's on a much larger scale. It's going to be a franchise in general, a long-running franchise. You see, recently, as of this recording, I saw the first few episodes of Transformers, the original series, in theaters. It was an AMC event in honor of the 40th anniversary. They had like a lot of cute little things. For starters, it opened with one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a theater, but they essentially showed the first 4 episodes, and the first episode specifically had a table reading version of it where they had the original actors and some new actors on the show, basically live as the episode was going on, doing the lines. So it was like a mixture of classic and new, and it got me thinking. And this is something that I've been wanting to talk about on here since it hit the 40th anniversary for Transformers. I am a big Transformers fan. I love Transformers. It's something that I grew up with. I mean, specifically, I grew up with Beast Wars, which is one of the later versions at that, well, not really anymore, but pretty much at the time that I had watched it, it was one of the later versions of Transformers. Pretty popular show. Essentially, that's what got me into this stuff. And yeah, it's a franchise that's near and dear to my heart. Before we get started, I just want to say, if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. Transformers. Like I said, it means a lot to me. Going beyond Beast Wars, I did get into the original show. I believe a re-edited version of it. I kind of get hazy on this, but from my understanding, I guess they did re-edits of the show at some point. I don't know. I remember seeing they had like Transformers Armada, which was like an anime. I eventually saw the original animated movie. And then right after that, we got the live action Michael Bay movies, which I remember the first time I saw it, impressed. Those effects are still amazing to this day. And then I just kind of slowly started hating the movies because they're kind of dumb and stupid. And eventually, I don't know, I turned around on the franchise. Like, I don't hate the Michael Bay movies as much as I did before. I don't think they're particularly good, but I do think there is something there. I mean, at the very least, the effects are still always impressive in those movies. And the action, even if I think it goes a little too far with some of the characters, especially with Optimus, I think he's a little too much of an executioner in those movies. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty cool action. It really got me thinking, like, why does Transformers endure? Because when you get right down to it, and this is something that I thought of while I was watching the first 4 episodes of the original show, is like, this is very nakedly a toy commercial, and it's realistically not a very good one. Pretty much the plot was thin paper thin, and yet I found myself oddly attracted to the characters. Obviously, the main thing that makes Transformers sell as a thing is the fact that it's a show about robots that turn into cars that turn into robots. They don't know how hard that is to grasp as one of the coolest things ever. You got cars, vehicles, anything like that, which is already cool enough as it is, but now you're turning them into robots. It's very easy to get it from that perspective, because when you get right down to it, kids love cool ideas for toys. But I still think there's something more there, and that's my thing with the franchise, is that this is a franchise that, for as much as I love it, I do acknowledge that a lot of it is just dumb, poorly written stuff that's clearly meant to sell toys. And, to go back to my experience with watching the first 4 episodes in the theater, before the whole thing had started, there was like 15 minutes of toy commercials. Essentially, it was just like, okay, here's the new toy line that we have in honor of the 40th anniversary. Cool, whatever. All right, now here's the comic books that we're doing. Okay, cool. Here's some more toys. Cool. Here's the ride at the Universal theme park. Cool. And this just kept going and going to the point that I was busting out laughing, screaming out in the middle of the theater, buy our shit. Most people were laughing at this. I mean, it was just like this absurd, like, okay, when is the show starting? Because, we're already right into it, and this is like literally 15 minutes of toy commercials for Transformers. As dumb as that was, it was still fairly entertaining. But it really gets to the heart of this thing. It's like, yes, it is very much a toy commercial. At the end of the day, Transformers is nothing if not selling you products. And again, it endures. And I know I'm saying that a lot, but it is because I'm like, it's kind of crazy that this thing that is clearly meant to sell toys, that was from a period where everything was trying to sell you something, not only holds up to this day, not only has a lot of fans to this day, but it matters to a lot of people. Like, it's crazy because you get stuff like, for example, there's G.I. Joe, which Transformers has crossed over with in various media, like in the comics, rarely. And going by the ending of the last Transformers movie, Rise of the Beast, it seems that we're going to have that happen in the live action movie soon. G.I. Joe does not, I mean, I don't want to say that it has no weight in our modern day, but it has, it certainly isn't the appealing thing that Transformers is. And I don't think that's necessarily because Transformers is made of better things. I kind of do, but I don't think it's necessarily that it's that much different from G.I. Joe, because at the end of the day, it's the same basic idea. You got your good guys and your bad guys. The bad guys have Megatron and Starscream. Funniest pairing of all, because it's like, here's like the leader with his sidekick who's always trying to take his position. And it's funny. And, you got G.I. Joe with Cobra Commander, funny villain, cool villain. And you got these Joes that have like all these, funny quirks, like, oh, this Joe's basically an expert at this or that, all this stuff. And again, it's, because of that, you'd assume that, like, okay, it would be in the same level as Transformers, but again, Transformers is the one that has the more of the popularity and the relevancy now, whereas G.I. Joe, like, they've had 2 live action movies, both of which no one really cared all that much about. And it's not that they were necessarily any worse than any of the Transformers movies, and yet audiences didn't cling on to them. And yeah, that may be because it's humans versus robots, and robots are always going to be the cooler toys. But I like to think that it's because Transformers has a little more going on under the surface. Like, it's no real surprise, whether they intended it or not, that the phrase "more than meets the eye" is the Transformers catchphrase, slogan, whatever. Because the odd thing while I was watching these first 4 episodes, as goofy as it was, because they were riddled with bad animation, silly stories and whatnot, I started realizing there is something there. Not that, other things don't have anything there. I'm sure you can probably make this argument for G.I. Joe, just to keep it with that example. But I did notice that it definitely had something going on right there that, whether they intended it or not, and I'm 100% sure that they didn't intend that, makes Transformers more relevant than ever in a way that many other shows aren't, that don't hold up from the same period, that, again, are just similar good guys versus bad guys setups. And it's that those first 4 episodes, especially the first 3, were mostly focused on the Decepticons, who, after a crash landing on Earth, between them and the good guys, the Autobots, are pretty much trying to take a bunch of the fuels on Earth to basically get their ship up and running to go back home. Essentially, they would turn stuff like oil, gases, whatever, into what they know as energon. It's interesting because you kind of look at it and it's like, okay, so these Decepticons are here on Earth, very uncaring towards the people and nature and whatnot, just stealing the resources for their own fuel. And it is not me suggesting that they were thinking about, like, oh, let's make a commentary on how a lot of societies just go into other societies to steal their resources for their own gain. But that's kind of what's going on here, and that's kind of interesting. Like, when you think about it, is that this dumb kids cartoon about robots that turn into cars are making this whole thing where the villains are evil because they're coming in stealing our resources. And again, it's not like it's even trying to be radical or anything like that, but how often do you actually see kids shows acknowledge, like, hey, look, the bad guys are people who uncaringly take the resources off of smaller people. And yeah, maybe there's quite a few, but to the extent that this is a toy commercial, I don't know. I feel like it's a little something there. Not enough to make it like this smart show, but the fact that it's willing to think about that kind of stuff, where it's like, hey, look, the bad guys are specifically the ones who are doing this, and it's not like the Autobots do it themselves. The Autobots are specifically like, okay, we do need our fuel, the fuel, but instead of just taking it, they work with the people who are already there in the land. They end up protecting them from these evil invaders, and the people of the land decide like, okay, we're gonna share our resources with you, knowing that you guys aren't gonna abuse our things like these guys are. Again, it's kind of cool. It's not something that, at least in my mind, I often see in these things that even acknowledge the fact that, hey, look, the bad guys are just the abusers, and the good guys are willing to work with the people nearby, in a different way where it's not them abusing them. And sure, we've had stories where like, oh look, the good guys, work with like the foreigners or whatever. But the fact that it's like now in this situation, it's basically like, hey, humanity, especially, we're to assume it's supposed to be America, where it mostly takes place, are being the ones who are being attacked because America has a long history of doing messed up things. And look, I'm not saying that this is the first time that any of this has ever been tackled. It definitely isn't. But for a kids show, especially one that's made for toys, I don't know. It feels very different. And this even goes on into other things that the Transformers have been involved with, because again, like I mentioned, I got into this through Beast Wars, and I rewatched a bit of Beast Wars a while back. I even did an episode talking about Beast Wars, and surprise, surprise, it's a toy commercial. You get the first episode ending, or the first two-parter episode, whatever, ending with Optimus Primal, their version of Optimus Prime, just shouting out, "Oh, this is the Beast Wars," as if that's supposed to mean anything other than just she's saying the name of the show in a way that's supposed to seem cool for kids. And again, it's one of those things where it's like you look at it and you realize like, man, there is a lot of stuff in here that feels a lot smarter than what they're doing, whether or not they're intending it or not. Like, okay, let's introduce this character named Dinobot, who at first you think is going to be like the Starscream of the show, but instead he actually leaves the evil robot faction to be with the good guys. And at first it's just the whole thing of like, oh, I'm going to take down the leader to get revenge on the evil one, and and whatnot. But over time, he becomes a valued member to the show. There's a whole episode where basically he, without going into too much detail, partially because I haven't seen it in so long that I can't remember the specifics, but also because, just for those who haven't seen it, but at some point he does pretty much sacrifice himself. And it's, for a kid's show, it's very smart of the way they handle it, and it feels very mature in a way that you wouldn't expect from a toy commercial. Beast Wars was filled with a lot of things like this, where there was a lot of character and story development that, yeah, at the end of the day, this was still just Transformers, but now they're animals instead of cars. But it felt very different from the norm. Very much like big ideas about how society creates us. And in this case, because they're robots, they're really programmed to be a certain way, and yet they're able to break away from those programmings. Like I said, the Dinobot character starts off as evil, but basically gets tired of Megatron and defects to the good guys. And at first you're thinking like, okay, well, he's just gonna be evil because he's evil, but he becomes a very nuanced character. And you even get within that whole thing a whole growth from the various characters. Like you got the character Rat Trap, who never really trusts him throughout a lot of it, and it's not necessarily racism, but it kind of feels like that because he's constantly like, oh yeah, since he's one of those guys, that means he's always going to be evil. I don't know. It's definitely stuff that you just don't see stupid things tackle as much, and that kind of stuff. Even if it's not necessarily unique to this franchise, the fact that they're thinking about it, I'm like, I get why this franchise is still to this day this big thing that matters to a lot of people. The Michael Bay movies, as silly as they are, as dumb as they are, feel a lot smarter than a lot of people give them credit for. And part of that is just Bay's sensibilities. Gotten around to watching Michael Bay movies after this and even before this, but realistically, the point being is that a lot of people just dumb Michael Bay's work down to just explosions, sexy ladies, and guys being all tough and whatnot. And whether or not he fully realizes it, and I'm not gonna say he doesn't, but I'm also gonna say that maybe he doesn't think about it as much. His work often has a lot of smarter things going on under the surface. A lot of it is essentially nihilism, where people are dumb, cruel, and useless, but he doesn't always go into that. Like, you do get the people who are good at their very core. It's very much yeah, there's a lot of people that suck, but there are good people at the end of the day. The most obvious thing that you could say with his work is that while a lot of people like to say, like, oh, he does military propaganda, you do see, like, okay, well, he supports the soldier, but not the government figure, which is interesting. Granted, I guess it's not, again, the most unique stance, much like the Transformers, but it's not something that you see enough of, especially for what's supposed to be dumb material, where it fully acknowledges, like, okay, soldiers are good people, because at the end of the day, there are people who are risking their lives for the good of humanity. But then you got these government figures who, you'd assume are good as well because they're in charge of those soldiers. But instead, no, they're abusing them, taking advantage of them. That kind of goes into his Transformers movies as well. Whereas, at the start of it, the government openly accepts, like, the Autobots, pretty much. By the time we get to the third movie, they essentially screw them over. The fourth movie has the Autobots pretty much on the run. Despite all the good that they've done for society, they're now wanted because the government has decided that they're not needed anymore. And they've essentially tossed them aside and are trying to manufacture their own Transformers that they could control more directly, which is interesting to me. That, you get these ideas coming out of a Michael Bay movie and a Michael Bay Transformers movie, which sounds, from the little that you can, understand of that, sounds like the dumbest possible thing in existence. But it's a lot smarter than you would expect. These are still silly movies. They're not going to be the kinds of movies that changes a person's life, I don't think. But there are movies that, when you sit back and think about everything that you're watching, as much as you understand that there is stupid stuff going on there, like, the whole Romeo and Juliet law in the fourth movie, or pretty much everything that happens in that second movie, which was done during the whole writer's strike of '09, or before that. It came out in 2009, but, it was affected by a writer's strike. There's a lot under that surface that makes it stand out. I mean, I don't know if I can link this on the podcast, but I'll try to see if I can link it at the very least in the description. Definitely in the YouTube video, but there is a video that I saw. I believe it's called "This Machine Kills Fascists," or maybe that's what the title card says. It's from the YouTube account Empire Records. The video is called "Learning to Love Michael Bay's Transformers Movies." Just an incredible analysis of these movies. And of course, the person even acknowledges that some of it might just be his own interpretation, but these are things that people have talked about, where it's like, you kind of get the idea of, like, hey, maybe this is an interpretation of the Transformers where we're meant to acknowledge that all the Transformers are evil, not just the Decepticons, but mostly the Autobots. I don't really subscribe to that idea, and not in terms of, what he's saying in terms of the movie. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't really care for that. Like, if you were to hand me the reins to the Transformers, what I would like to see out of it, I wouldn't want that. I love the idea of good Autobots, but it is an interesting take on the concept, and I can't deny that um, everything the video lays out is very interesting to me, and was a major reason why I started turning around on this. Not the entirety of it, just because um, even before then I was like, okay, look, those movies have impressive effects that are just not being matched by a lot of blockbusters today. So it is kind of cool to see how they work out, even if I don't necessarily like the story in them. But that's the thing, is like this whole franchise is filled with movies, shows, and stuff like that where you'd think that they're just dumb on the surface, and they kind of are dumb on the surface. But then you actually watch it and you realize, like, man, there's a lot going on here that other shows don't talk about, or franchises, or even if they do, it just suddenly made more interesting because of the way they're approaching it, and that in of itself makes it stand out a lot more. The first episode I ever did for this podcast was on Transformers the movie, the original animated feature, and while it's not an especially well made movie, well, the animation is nice, but what I'm getting at is that it's, the story is pretty much all over the place, and it was always intended to be a commercial. They killed off a bunch of these characters because it was a commercial. The fact that they did that actually gave it a more interesting identity, because suddenly these characters that never died on the cartoon, or if they got seriously injured, would still come out okay, are now dying left and right on the screen. And this is all just done just to get new toys out in the field. It resulted in one of the saddest moments for a lot of fans, where Optimus Prime is killed off. That in and of itself gave it so much more weight that it needed, even if the people making it never intended to give it weight. Because now we realize that, okay, well, these characters, are vulnerable. There are, like us, able to pass on. We get to learn a bit about their spirituality, even if it's not anything too complex or deep, but it, gives us an idea of, like, hey, look, even something mechanical, something that to us is the furthest thing from being human, still has essentially a soul within it. And it also, because it was all done to get new toys on the market, it creates the scenario where, if you're looking at it as a war movie, which you kind of can, because it is a war between two different factions, it becomes the story of, like, okay, what happens when the leaders on both sides die? How do they handle that loss? Like, how do they go about continuing on their mission without their leaders? Like, who steps up to become a leader, and how they handle that stuff. And again, this is a movie that is not very bright, if you look at it just as how it plays out, but because there's these ideas at play, it makes it very interesting. Like, Transformers the movie is probably my favorite of the Transformers movies. It has, to me at least, the most interesting and out there ideas going on throughout the movie. It's very much a 90-minute toy commercial about an evil robot um, attacking good robots. But it's in the presentation that, whether they intended it or not, and they definitely didn't intend it became something much more. Because, like, you have the big villain being Unicron, who is this giant transformer that just eats planets, because it's essentially what it eats. And yeah, they essentially just present him as just an evil being, but at the same time, when you look at it from that perspective, you realize, like, well, he's not necessarily evil. I mean, he is, but he's just doing what he can to survive. And yeah, of course, he's manipulating, like, the evil side to essentially defend them so that the good guys don't defeat him. But it's like it's just this thing that's more incomprehensible than you would imagine, because it's just like, well, again, it's just going around space eating. I mean, in this scenario, it is evil, but you take that idea elsewhere and you realize, like, it's not evil, it's not good, it just is. And there's a whole lot of other things. One of the things I like is that there's, like, this universal code to show that you're friendly, where the characters say, and this is a silly phrase, but they say, Bawi Grana Nini Bong. Silliest phrase around, but the fact that they have this whole thing where it's like, hey, we have this phrase that shows that we're friends. It's kind of cool. It's kind of neat. It's something that I would like to see in the real world as we explore more lands. You know, like how cool would it be to just go into another country and just be able to say one particular phrase, and you know, it results in people showing their support for you and helping you out. And if we find other planets with life, I mean, that would be cool to even know. But it does add some realism to it by acknowledging, like, hey, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But just because it doesn't work all the time doesn't mean that you should give up on the phrase. I don't know. I might revisit this because I wanted to talk about Transformers in this matter, but for the most part, to me, this is just a franchise that, yes, is very dumb. It's clearly not made to be this incredibly cerebral thing, but more often than not, they unintentionally stumble upon great things. Like with Beast Wars, they were originally supposed to have so many characters on that show, but because it was CG, they were like, okay, we gotta cut down the amount of characters that we have, and as a result, we have to actually focus on the characters that we do have to flesh them out, and made it all the better. I don't know. It's crazy to even think about how this franchise it just being a toy commercial when you see it matters to so many people. Optimus Prime should just be a basic good guy leader character, but when the character died in the original movie, it made a whole bunch of kids cry, and I totally get it. As far as good guy leader characters go, he's one of the best ones, I think, just because while he may not be the deepest character around, one, he has the coolest voice provided by Peter Cullen. I think it really comes down to just how much of a caring leader they make him on this, and whether or not they even intended to do it this way, but the fact that he's like this, you know, war hero essentially, but he knows, like, okay, let me show compassion to these people. He's not necessarily like a lot of other leader characters who just push around their assistants or soldiers or whatever. Even if they see they're well intentioned, like he genuinely shows care for it. He's stoic, but he doesn't just get his soldiers into horrible situations just cause, to show that they can be better if they try. Like, you know, I don't know. He has speeches. It's all very cool, and it's hard to fully explain it without watching it. But you know, when you do, you kind of understand. Like, yeah, this is why people like this character, and why this character matters to a lot of people. His speeches may not be the deepest, but they're kind of inspiring, and it just makes you want to care about other creatures the way he does. Plus, it's just cool that he's a truck that turns into a robot. Voiced by Peter Cullen. Coolest thing ever. Yeah, Transformers, dumb as shit, but somehow there's things under the surface that, like the franchise says, is more than meets the eye, and that's why I love it. Thank you for listening.
You are either lying or you're stupid. I'm stupid. I'm stupid.
Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like, and comment. Ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast and give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/psycams. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you come back for more in the future.